Close your eyes for a moment and picture this: you're standing in the shadow of towering stone walls, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of whispered secrets. The air hums with something strange, almost electric, as if the very ground beneath your feet remembers the voices that once filled this space. But these weren't just ordinary sounds. In the ancient world, sound was a weapon, a tool wielded by kings and priests to bend reality itself. Think about that for a second. Long before microphones or amplifiers, entire civilizations were built on the power of acoustics, architectural marvels designed to manipulate minds, to make the ordinary feel divine, and to turn whispers into commands that echoed through generations. This isn't just about ruins or forgotten artifacts. It's about the hidden science of control, the way sound could shape belief, loyalty, even fear. Take Chavín de Huántar in Peru, where priests spoke through labyrinthine tunnels, their voices warping into godlike roars that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Or Derinkuyu, the sprawling underground city in Turkey, where echoes traveled like ghosts through narrow passages, disorienting invaders and making allies feel watched by unseen forces. These weren't accidents, they were calculated designs, sonic blueprints for power, and the craziest part, we're only just beginning to understand how deep this technology of sound really went. So how did ancient rulers turn vibrations in the air into instruments of authority? How did a well-placed echo make people believe they were hearing the voice of a god? That's the mystery we're unraveling today, because when you listen closely to these lost cities, you start to hear something extraordinary, not just the past, but the echoes of a brilliance we're still catching up to. This is the story of how sound built empires, how architecture became psychology, and why the secrets of these acoustic masterpieces might just change the way you think about power forever. Ready to step into the echo chamber of history? Let's begin. To grasp how ancient architects turned sound into a tool of power, we need to step into their world, one without blueprints, without computers, without even the basic acoustic theories we take for granted today. These builders worked with intuition, observation, and generations of trial and error, uncovering secrets of sound that modern science is only now quantifying. Picture a single whisper skimming along a curved stone wall, bending around corners like water flowing through a channel. That's reverberation, the way sound lingers and overlaps in enclosed spaces. Ancient engineers sculpted their temples and tombs to exploit this phenomenon, elongating echoes until a single word could repeat 7, 8, even 12 times. In places like the Hypogeum of Malta, a subterranean sanctuary carved over 5,000 years ago, certain chambers amplify frequencies close to the human voice's natural resonance. Speak there and your words gain weight, as if the very earth is speaking with you. Then there's directional acoustic sound guided like an arrow. At the Mayan pyramid of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza, a hand clap at the base ricochets off the steps to create an eerie chirping echo, mimicking the cry of the sacred Quetzal bird. The effect isn't random. Each step is precisely angled to fracture and reflect sound waves in this exact way, a feat that would challenge modern engineers with lasers and microphones. And in the oracle chamber of Petra, narrow passageways funnel whispers from hidden priests directly to the ears of seekers, making private counsel feel like divine revelation. These weren't parlor tricks, they were psychological masterstrokes. When sound behaves unnaturally, when it seems to come from nowhere or carries further than possible, or echoes in patterns that mimic animal calls, it triggers something primal in the human brain. Doubt dissolves or takes over, but perhaps the most chilling innovation was resonance. certain frequencies can make stone vibrate, creating a physical hum in the air. In the tunnels beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent in Teotihuacán, low chants would have sent vibrations through the floor, up the legs of worshippers into their chests. The effect, a visceral, inescapable sensation that the gods were not just speaking, they were shaking the earth beneath your feet. Modern archaeologists have measured these spaces and found resonant frequencies between 90 and 120 Hz, the same range that induces trance states in shamanic rituals. That's no coincidence, it's evidence of a lost science, one that understood sound not just as noise but as a lever for the human mind. So when we marvel at these structures today, we're not just seeing stones stacked high. We're witnessing the remnants of an ancient technology, one that used physics as psychology, turning architecture into the ultimate puppet master of belief. And this was just the foundation, because once you knew how to bend sound, you could build cities where power didn't just speak, it echoed. High in the Peruvian Andes, shrouded in mist and mystery, lies Chavín de Huántar, a temple complex where sound didn't just fill the air, it rewired minds. Walk its narrow, winding corridors today, and you'll feel it. The walls seem to press in, not with stone, but with sound. This was no ordinary place of worship. The Chavin architects designed it as a sonic labyrinth, a maze where every whisper twisted into something otherworldly. Priests didn't just speak here, their voices traveled through hidden ducts, emerging as disembodied roars that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Imagine standing in that darkness, hearing a command boom from nowhere. Wouldn't you believe it was the voice of a god? At the heart of this acoustic web stood the lanzon, a towering granite monolith carved with the snarling face of a deity. Strike it gently and the stone would sing, vibrating at frequencies between 90 and 120 Hz, the same range that triggers altered states in the human brain. Modern experiments prove it. These sounds don't just reach your ears, they pulse through your body, quickening your heartbeat, dilating your pupils, pulling you into a trance. The Chavin knew this, they used it. During ceremonies, the combination of the lanzon's drone and the echoing chants of priests would have been overwhelming, a sensory overload that blurred the line between reality and revelation. But the true genius lay in the temple's galleries. These weren't just passageways, they were acoustic filters. Some corridors deadened sound, creating pockets of eerie silence. Others amplified it, bouncing chants back and forth until they layered into a chorus no human throat could produce. And then there were the canals, carved beneath the floors. These water channels did more than drain rainfall. Filled with liquid, they became natural sound amplifiers, bending vibrations in ways that made whispers audible across entire courtyards. A priest could stand hidden, murmur into a duct, and moments later, their words would erupt from a statue's mouth. It was theater, yes, but theater with a purpose, to make the impossible feel tangible. What's chilling is how precise it all was. Archaeologists have found conch shell trumpets in the ruins, instruments capable of producing infrasound frequencies too low for human ears to detect, yet proven to induce unease, even dread. Combine that with the flickering torchlight, the labyrinth's disorienting twists, and the lanzon's vibrations, and you have a recipe for absolute psychological surrender. This wasn't just about awe, it was about control. By weaponizing sound, the Chavin elite didn't just command obedience, they engineered belief. And in a world without written records, where power lived in the ear of the listener, that was the most formidable authority of all. Yet the most haunting question isn't how they built it. It's why we ever stopped believing sound could hold such power. Because in these echoing stones, there's a lesson. Reality is malleable. Shape the sounds around people, and you shape what they think is real. That's a truth as potent today as it was 3,000 years ago. Beneath the rolling plains of Cappadocia, where wind and time have carved fairy chimneys from soft volcanic rock, lies a secret far older than the landscape itself. Derinkuyu isn't just an underground city, it's a masterpiece of acoustic engineering, a place where sound didn't just travel, it hunted. Descend into its shadowy depths, and you'll notice something unsettling. The tunnels aren't merely narrow. They're precisely angled, their walls curving like the inside of a conch shell, designed to catch the faintest shuffle of a footstep and amplify it into a thunderous warning. Imagine being an invader creeping through these passageways, every careless movement echoing ahead of you, betraying your position to defenders who knew the terrain like their own heartbeat. This wasn't just architecture, it was psychological warfare. At the city's core lay the great meeting chambers, where leaders gathered beneath vaulted ceilings that acted like natural megaphones. A single spoken word here would ripple outward, carried by the stone with eerie clarity, reaching every corner of the communal spaces. But step into the side passages, the cramped corridors leading nowhere, and the opposite happened. These were acoustic dead zones, places where whispered conversations collapsed into muffled silence. The message was clear: unity had volume, dissent. That was meant to die in the dark. Water wells doubled as resonance chambers, their cylindrical shafts transforming ordinary speech into booming commands that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Meanwhile, ventilation shafts essential for survival were strategically placed to distort sound, making it impossible to tell if a voice came from above, below, or some unseen corridor. The effect was deliberate disorientation, a way to keep residents perpetually off balance, forever reliant on those who knew the city's sonic secrets. But the most chilling detail, the underground wasn't just a refuge from invaders, it was a tool for social control. In a world where light was scarce, sound became the ultimate authority. Leaders didn't need to shout. The city's design did it for them, amplifying their voices while smothering opposition. Rebellion isn't just hard in a place like Derinkuyu, it's acoustically impossible. And that's the real revelation here. These weren't just walls and tunnels. They were the ancient equivalent of a surveillance state, where every echo was a silent enforcer, and the very air conspired to keep power in the hands of those who built it. What's haunting is how familiar it feels. Today, we live in a world of algorithms and echo chambers, where information is shaped by invisible architectures. Derinkuyu reminds us the technology changes, but the game stays the same. Control the sound, and you control the story. Control the story, and you control the people. The stones of Derinkuyu whisper a warning across the centuries, one we do well to hear. The slopes of Mount Parnassus hold one of history's most chilling examples of acoustic manipulation, the Oracle of Delphi. Here, in a temple built over seismic fissures leaking ethylene gas, a single woman's voice became the conduit for divine will. But this wasn't magic. It was physics. The priestess, known as the Pythia, would descend into a chamber beneath the temple, inhaling vapors that induced a trance. Then, as her words spilled forth in cryptic verses, the architecture took over. The temple's curved stone walls acted like a natural amplifier, bending her voice into eerie, resonant tones that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Pilgrims who'd traveled for weeks would stand trembling as her distorted pronouncements washed over them, each syllable stretched and warped until it felt less like human speech and more like the earth itself speaking. What made Delphi so effective wasn't just the spectacle, it was the precision of the illusion. The temple's aditon, the inner sanctum where the Pythia sat, was designed with a sunken floor and a parabolic ceiling, creating a whispering gallery effect. Even her faintest murmurs would ricochet upward, blending with the hollow echoes of the underground chambers. Meanwhile, The ethylene gas, now confirmed by modern soil tests, heightened her euphoria, slurring her speech just enough to make her prophecies sound alien. The result, a perfect storm of psychological manipulation. When Alexander the Great visited Delphi, demanding a prophecy on his conquests, the Pythia's voice boomed back, "You are invincible, my son." Whether she believed it or not, the acoustics ensured those words stuck like glue, but the real power lay in the aftermath. Delphi's priests were master editors, translating the Pythia's fragmented ramblings into polished hexameter verses. These weren't just predictions, they were sound bites designed to be memorized and repeated, and repeat them people did. The temple's location at the crossroads of Greece turned it into a viral network of its time, where every pilgrim became a carrier of the oracle's words. Statesmen waged wars based on her ambiguous advice. Colonies were founded, treaties signed, even fortunes spent, all because of phrases shaped by stone and gas. What's unsettling is how little separated the sacred from the scientific. The Pythia's prophecies weren't just heard, they were felt. Low-frequency reverberations from the underground fissures would have vibrated through the temple floor, resonating in the chests of visitors. That physical sensation, the literal trembling of the earth, made the experience visceral, impossible to dismiss as mere trickery. Delphi didn't just use sound to communicate. It used sound to colonize minds, yet for all its grandeur, the oracle's greatest lesson might be its fragility. When Rome's emperors began demanding flattering prophecies, the gas leaks, already sporadic, dried up entirely. No amount of architectural genius could compensate for the loss of that primal, chemical catalyst. The voice of the gods fell silent, not because people stopped believing, but because the science behind the spectacle unraveled. And that's the irony. The same forces that made Delphi irresistible, the fusion of geology, acoustics, and psychology, also made it unsustainable. The gods, it seems, were always just one seismic shift away from being out of a job. Standing before the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacán, you're not just looking at a monument, you're standing inside an instrument. The moment your hands meet in a single clap, the structure answers back with a sound that defies logic, a sharp, fluttering echo that ripples through the air like the call of the Quetzal, the sacred bird whose feathers adorned the robes of kings. This isn't an accident of architecture. It's a calculated feat of acoustic engineering, one that transformed stone into a divine messenger. The secret lies in the pyramid's stepped facade. Each of its four sides is lined with identical terraces, their edges spaced at precise intervals to fracture sound waves into cascading echoes. When those echoes collide, they create a phenomenon called the chirp effect, a series of rapid, high-pitched reverberations that mimic the Quetzal's cry. Modern acousticians have measured it. The pyramid's design filters out lower frequencies, leaving only those piercing, bird-like tones. For ancient worshippers, the message was unmistakable. If a mere clap could summon the voice of a god's favored creature, imagine what a priest's chants might conjure. But the pyramid's sonic tricks didn't stop there. At dawn on the equinoxes, the rising sun would strike the pyramid's western face, casting shadows that aligned with hidden markers in the plaza below. Chants timed to this moment would ride the morning air, amplified by the pyramid's concave surfaces, creating the illusion that the gods themselves were singing the sun into the sky. It was theater on a cosmic scale, with acoustics as the invisible stagehand. What's chilling is how deliberate this all was. Archaeologists have found evidence of smaller, now ruined platforms surrounding the pyramid, each positioned to reflect sound back toward the center. Together, they formed a kind of ancient surround sound system, enveloping crowds in a dome of noise that felt less like human creation and more like the fabric of the universe vibrating. And here's the genius: the pyramid's acoustics worked best at specific frequencies, those used in ritual chants. Ordinary speech would fade, but the priests' trained voices, those carried clear and commanding, as if the stones themselves were choosing who to amplify. This wasn't just about awe, it was about hierarchy. In a city where the elite lived atop the pyramid's axis, the very soundscape reinforced their proximity to the divine. The higher you climbed, the clearer the echoes. The closer you stood to power, the more the gods seemed to speak through you, and for those below, the message was in the muffling. The pyramid didn't just sing, it whispered a warning. Power wasn't just seen or heard. It was felt in the bones, a vibration that said some voices would always ring louder than others. Teotihuacán's rulers understood something we often forget. Sound isn't just information, it's emotion, it's memory. And when you design a city to sculpt that sound, you don't just build an empire. You compose its anthem. Stonehenge stands frozen in time, its massive stones mute under the English sky, but peel back the layers of silence, and you'll uncover a secret as startling as it is sonic. Those blue stones hauled over 150 miles from Wales. They aren't just any rocks. Strike them with a mallet, and they ring with a metallic clang, like a bell forged by the earth itself. Now picture this: under the cloak of twilight, priests' hammers rising and falling in rhythm, sending eerie, resonant tones pulsing through the circle. The sound wouldn't just fill the air, it would warp it, bouncing off the standing stones in cascading echoes that disoriented the senses. This wasn't accidental theater. Modern experiments reveal something extraordinary. The blue stone's unique composition, spotted dolerite rich in quartz, vibrates at frequencies that can induce trance states. When played in rhythm, these tones create binaural beats, a phenomenon where slightly different frequencies in each ear trick the brain into perceiving a third, pulsating sound wave. Neuroscientists know this effect well. It's used today to alter brainwave patterns, easing anxiety or deepening meditation. But 5,000 years ago, it would have felt like magic. Participants already primed by fasting or ritual herbs wouldn't just hear the sound, they'd feel it in their bones, a physical force pulling them toward revelation. And then there's the layout. Stonehenge's horseshoe of blue stones acts like a natural amplifier, curving sound inward toward the altar stone at the center. Chants or drumbeats here would have ricocheted in overlapping waves, creating a sonic vortex where voices seem to multiply. Add the summer solstice sunrise, when the heel stone aligns with the rising sun, and the effect becomes overwhelming, light and sound merging into a sensory crescendo. For ancient worshippers, this wasn't just ceremony, it was proof that the stones were alive, that the gods spoke through vibration, and that those who controlled the sound held the keys to the divine. Yet the most haunting detail isn't the technology, it's the psychology. Sound archaeologist Stephen Waller proved that identical tones played from multiple sources create phantom echoes, illusions of invisible pillars or walls. At Stonehenge, where stones are spaced at precise intervals, these auditory illusions would have made the circle feel like it was breathing, expanding and contracting with each beat. Imagine the power in that. A priest could make the very earth seem to shift, convincing crowds they stood at the threshold of another world. What's left now is silence. But the stones remember. Run your hand along a blue stone's weathered surface, and you're touching an instrument that once scored the rituals of an entire civilization. The genius of Stonehenge wasn't just in its alignment with the stars. It was in its ability to turn sound into a rope, pulling mortal minds toward the heavens. And that's a power that echoes far beyond stone. It whispers a truth we're only beginning to grasp. Sometimes the most persuasive voices aren't spoken at all. They're struck, Deep beneath the island of Malta, carved from solid limestone over 5,000 years ago, the Hypogeum of Malta isn't just a burial site, it's a cathedral of sound. Step inside the so-called oracle chamber and your voice changes. A low hum doesn't just echo here, it multiplies, layering upon itself until the air thrums like the inside of a giant drum. Modern acousticians have measured it. This tiny, egg-shaped room resonates at exactly 110 Hz, a frequency scientifically proven to alter brain function. Speak at that pitch and your words don't just reach ears, they vibrate ribcage, rattle teeth, and trigger a primal response somewhere between wonder and dread. What's staggering is the precision. The Hypogeum's builders, people without written language, without metal tools, somehow engineered this space so that certain frequencies would amplify while others vanished. The ceiling curves inward like a seashell, focusing sound waves into a single spot where a priest or oracle might have stood. Chant here, and your voice gains uncanny depth, as if the stone itself is speaking through you. But step just 3 feet to the side, and the magic collapses, proof that every inch of this chamber was calculated for maximum effect. Then there's the Holy of Holies, a niche carved with spirals that mirror the cochlea of the human ear. Whisper into it, and your voice travels upward through hidden channels, emerging 30 feet away with eerie clarity. It's a trick that would feel supernatural even today. Imagine how it must have sounded to Neolithic worshippers, hearing disembodied voices rise from the earth during sacred rites. But the Hypogeum's real power wasn't just in amplification. It was in contrast. Some passages deaden sound completely, creating pockets of suffocating silence that make the sudden roar of the oracle chamber even more jarring. This push and pull silence, then thunder, stillness, then vibration, would have left participants emotionally volatile, primed for revelation. Add the flicker of oil lamps casting shadows on the wall's red ochre paintings, and you have a multisensory assault designed to overwhelm. What's chilling is how little we still understand. Recent studies suggest the Hypogeum's lower levels may resonate with infrasound, frequencies below human hearing that can induce nausea or even visions. Was this accidental, or did the builders discover through generations of trial and error that certain shapes made people feel the presence of something other? The stones won't say, but they hum with a truth we're only now deciphering. Long before science gave us the words, humans knew sound could shape reality. And in the Hypogeum's echoing dark, they wielded that power like a knife cutting through doubt, leaving only belief in its wake. The stone walls of a Mayan Ballcourt didn't just enclose a game, they weaponized sound. Picture this, 2 teams battling on a narrow alley, their every move tracked by the thunderous rebound of a 10-pound rubber ball. But here's the twist. The court's parallel walls acted like an ancient soundboard, catching each impact and hurling it back with such precision that a single strike could echo for nearly 3 full seconds. Players didn't just move, they sounded like giants, their footfalls and collisions amplified into something almost supernatural. For spectators packed onto the sloping sidelines, it wasn't just a match. It was a visceral, surround sound spectacle where every thud vibrated through their chests. Now consider the ball itself. Made from the sacred sap of the rubber tree, these spheres weren't just tools of the game. When smashed against the court's limestone markers, they produced a sharp, resonant pop, a sound eerily similar to thunder cracking across the sky. Archaeoacoustic studies confirm it. The frequencies match those of distant storms. And that's no accident. The Mayan rain god Chok was believed to speak through thunder, his voice heralding life-giving downpours. So when rulers presided over these games, they weren't just hosting sports. They were staging acoustic illusions, turning athleticism into evidence of divine favor. But the real mastery lay in the distortion. certain ballcourts, like the Grand Arena at Chichen Itza, were built with whispering gallery effects. A murmur at one end could travel clearly to the opposite side, a trick achieved by precise curvature in the walls. Priests or nobles stationed at strategic points could intervene in the game with well-timed pronouncements, their voices seeming to emerge from thin air. Imagine the psychological impact, players already exhausted by the grueling match, now hearing disembodied commands they couldn't locate. It was theater of the highest order, where sound blurred the line between the mortal and the divine. The most chilling detail, these courts weren't neutral stages, they were tuned instruments. Carved reliefs at Capon show defeated players kneeling as their heads are offered to the gods, a reminder that these games sometimes ended in sacrifice. With that stakes, the acoustics took on a darker role. The echoes didn't just celebrate victory, they magnified desperation, the last gasps of the doomed ringing endlessly off the walls. Every scream, every plea became part of the spectacle, hammering home the ruler's ultimate authority over life and death. What's left today are silent stones. But stand in the center of an intact ballcourt and clap your hands once. That lingering reverberation isn't just physics, it's the ghost of a civilization that understood sound could bend reality. The Mayans didn't just play a game, they composed an anthem of power where every echo was a verse and the score was always written by the gods. Petra's rose-red cliffs don't just dazzle the eyes, they play tricks on the ears. Walk through the towering sandstone canyon that serves as the city's grand entrance, and you'll notice something strange. A whisper against the rock face skips forward like a stone across water, landing with startling clarity yards ahead. This wasn't just a quirk of geology. The Nabateans, Petra's ancient architects, sculpted this passage with a subtle inward curve, turning the entire canyon into a whispering gallery over half a mile long. A leader standing at the treasury could address crowds at the entrance without raising their voice, every syllable bouncing off the undulating walls with godlike resonance. But the real genius lay in selectivity. The Sikh doesn't amplify all sounds equally, it favors certain frequencies, particularly the deep, commanding tones of adult male voices. Modern acoustic scans reveal the canyon acts like a natural filter, muttering high-pitched noises while boosting low frequencies by up to 12 decibels. For Nabatean rulers, this was propaganda carved in stone. Their proclamations gained weight and gravitas while dissent, often voiced in higher, urgent tones, dissipated into the cliffs. Yet Petra's sonic control didn't stop at amplification. Beneath the iconic colonnaded streets, archaeologists have uncovered a network of listening tunnels, narrow shafts that funneled sound from public squares up to hidden chambers. A spy crouching in one of these rooms could overhear conversations verbatim from over 60 feet away, their ears pressed against openings disguised as decorative niches. The effect was psychological mastery. Citizens never knew when their words might be traveling upward to unseen ears. Most chilling of all was the theater. Carved directly into the mountainside, its semicircular rows of seats concentrate sound with eerie precision. A single coin dropped on the stage rings through every tier but voices from the audience. Those get swallowed. The design ensured performers, always elites or their proxies, held total acoustic dominance. Even the seating order played a role. Nobility occupied the front rows where reverberation was strongest, while commoners sat higher up where speeches grew faint. What made Petra unique wasn't just its beauty, but its brutality. Here, sound wasn't merely shaped, it was weaponized twice over. The same walls that made kings sound divine made rebels sound small. The same echoes that carried hymns to the heavens carried whispers to the secret police. And that's the paradox of power in stone. It giveth resonance and it taketh away. Perched on a sheer cliff in the Judean desert, Masada wasn't just a fortress, it was a sonic battleground. Herod the Great, a ruler who understood power in all its forms, designed this mountaintop stronghold to manipulate sound as deftly as a general maneuvers troops. The natural acoustics here were brutal. Winds howling through the canyon below would catch the clang of Roman armor, the shouts of centurions, and the relentless pounding of siege engines, funneling them upward to echo off the fortress walls. For the Jewish rebels holding Masada during the infamous siege, this wasn't just noise, it was psychological torture, a relentless reminder that their enemies surrounded them, even when they couldn't be seen. But the real innovation lay beneath their feet. Herod's engineers carved a network of hidden cisterns and tunnels into the rock, not just for water, but for war. These chambers acted like acoustic mirrors, distorting sound so that footsteps from one direction might seem to come from another. Attackers scaling the cliffs would find themselves disoriented, their own noises bouncing back at them in chaotic bursts. Meanwhile, inside the fortress, a different kind of sonic control unfolded. The northern palace's tiered design allowed commanders' voices to cascade down to the lower levels with startling clarity, while the thick walls of the storerooms muffled any whispers of dissent. It was a masterclass in auditory manipulation, sound shaped to unify the loyal and isolate the doubtful. The siege climax reveals just how potent this acoustic warfare was. When Roman battering rams finally breached the walls, the rebels' final act of defiance, mass suicide, was conducted in near silence. No wails, no cries, just the eerie absence of sound. Historians speculate this wasn't just bravery, it was strategy. By denying the Romans even the satisfaction of hearing their victory, the rebels turned silence itself into a weapon. Masada stones still remember that lesson. In the right hands, sound isn't just heard, it's felt, and sometimes the most powerful statement is the one you refuse to let echo. Yet what's most chilling isn't the technology, it's the universality. From Herod's desert fortress to modern concert halls designed for political rallies, the principles remain the same. Control the sound and you control the narrative. Amplify what serves you, muffle what doesn't. In the end, Masada stands as a monument not just to resistance, but to the timeless truth that power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's the quietest voices or the most calculated silences that shape history. Angkor Wat's corridors don't just lead somewhere, they sing. Walk through the temple's outermost gallery at dawn, when the first light filters through the lotus-shaped windows, and you'll feel it before you hear it, a low hum in the air, a vibration in the stone beneath your feet. This isn't just an ancient building. It's a carefully tuned instrument designed to turn human voices into something transcendent. Chant a single note in the right passage, and the walls answer back, amplifying the sound into a chorus that seems to come from everywhere at once. Modern acousticians have mapped these spaces and found something extraordinary. The corridors act like natural pipe organs, resonating at frequencies between 110 and 130 Hz, the same range that modern brainwave studies link to deep meditation. But the real magic lies in the imperfections. Unlike Western cathedrals where architects sought flawless acoustics, Angkor's builders intentionally created pockets of dissonance. Certain alcoves deaden sound abruptly, while others stretch echoes into eerie, fading whispers. The effect is deliberate, a push and pull between harmony and chaos that mirrors the Hindu-Buddhist concept of Maya, the illusion of reality. For worshippers, this sonic journey wasn't just background noise. It was a guided meditation, the very architecture pulling them between clarity and confusion, until their minds hung suspended, ripe for revelation. At the heart of this auditory labyrinth stands the central tower, where the corridors converge like spokes on a wheel. Here, the acoustics shift dramatically. A chant that rang clear in the galleries distorts as it climbs upward, fracturing into overlapping echoes that mimic the sound of chanting monks. Historians believe this was no accident. The tower's stairwells are carved with asuras and Devis mythological beings frozen in their eternal tug of war over the cosmic ocean. Their twisted forms aren't just decoration. They're acoustic diffusers, scattering sound waves in patterns that make human voices seem to rise from the stones themselves. What's chilling is how little this relied on technology. The builders used water as their secret weapon. Angkor's vast moats and reservoirs didn't just symbolize the sacred oceans of Hindu cosmology, they acted as giant sound mirrors. On still mornings, chants from the temple would skim across the water's surface, bouncing back with amplified force. Combine that with the jungle's natural white noise, the drone of cicadas, the rustle of leaves, and you have a sensory cocktail that blurred the line between the human and the divine. Yet the most powerful trick was psychological. Angkor Wat's layout ensured that only certain voices carried. The priests' trained chants, pitched to match the corridor's resonant frequencies, would swell to fill the space. But the uncertain murmurs of pilgrims, those dissolved into the walls, the message was clear. Divinity had a frequency, and it wasn't yours. That's the genius of Angkor's acoustics. They didn't just awe, they humbled, and in that humility, in the surrender to something greater than oneself, lay the true architecture of power. High above the tiered seats of the ancient theater at Epidorus, hidden in plain sight among the marble benches, lie some of history's most cunning acoustic tools, stone discs so precisely curved they functioned like primitive satellite dishes. These weren't decorative. Press your lips close to one, and your whisper would travel straight to a specific seat halfway across the arena, bypassing everyone else along the way. Imagine the power of that. A politician could murmur promises to a wealthy patron, a general could relay covert orders to his lieutenant, or a priest could deliver divine guidance to a chosen follower, all while the crowd around them heard nothing but silence. The engineering behind these sound mirrors reveals a sophistication we rarely attribute to antiquity. Each disc was carved with a parabolic curve, its surface smooth to reflect sound waves in a tight beam rather than scattering them. Modern experiments show that frequencies between 500 and 2000 Hz, the range of a conspiratorial whisper, could be projected with startling accuracy over distances exceeding 100 feet. But the real brilliance was in the selectivity. Unlike modern microphones that amplify everything equally, these mirrors filtered sound. A speaker could angle their head slightly to shift the beam's trajectory, effectively choosing who got to hear the message and who was left in the dark. This wasn't just about convenience. In Greek city-states where political fortunes could hinge on a single speech, controlling who heard what was a matter of survival. During the Peloponnesian War, generals used these discs to relay troop movements without alerting enemy spies in the crowd. Philosophers whispered provocative ideas to select students while avoiding the scrutiny of conservative elders. Even the Delphic oracle, it's rumored, employed similar technology, projecting cryptic pronouncements to specific petitioners to create the illusion of personalized divine insight. Yet the mirror's most subversive application was in the courts. Athenian law required public trials, but clever litigators found ways to bend the rules. By positioning allies near strategic mirrors, a defendant could receive whispered coaching from their lawyer without the jury catching on. Surviving court records hint at the frustration of judges who sensed collusion, but couldn't prove it a testament to how effectively these stones turned acoustics into a legal loophole. What's haunting is how familiar this feels. Today's social media algorithms function eerily like those ancient mirrors, amplifying messages for some while burying them for others. The technology has changed, but the game remains the same. Control the sound, and you control the story. The Greeks just had the audacity to carve their manipulation in stone. Roman basilicas didn't just house justice, they engineered it through sound. Step inside the towering Basilica Ulpia in Trajan's Forum, and you'd feel it immediately. The way your own breath seemed to echo back at you, louder and slower, as if the building itself was judging you before the magistrates even spoke. Those soaring vaulted ceilings weren't just about grandeur, they were acoustic weapons. A prosecutor's accusation would ricochet off the marble walls, each repetition adding weight to the charges until the air itself felt thick with condemnation. Meanwhile, a defendant's nervous reply would dissipate upward, lost in the cavernous space before reaching the juror's ears. The physics were brutal, sound traveled slower in cold air, and with morning trials often held in these chilly halls, a poor man's defense literally moved at a disadvantage. The emperor's balcony tells an even darker story. Positioned at the exact focal point where the basilica's arches converged, it functioned like a natural amplifier. When Nero or Domitian spoke from this perch, their words didn't echo, they pierced, cutting through the ambient noise with unnatural clarity. Archaeoacoustic studies show the balcony's semicircular design created a sound shadow effect, suppressing competing noises from below while boosting the imperial voice by nearly 15 decibels. No wonder ancient chronicles describe crowds falling silent the moment the emperor cleared his throat. The architecture made anything less than perfect attention physically uncomfortable. But the real manipulation lay in the seating. Senators occupied marble benches along the walls where sound waves reflected strongest, while common citizens stood in the center, the acoustic dead zone where overlapping echoes created a muddled drone. This wasn't accidental. A surviving letter from Pliny the Younger complains how he could barely hear witness testimonies from his assigned seat, while the patricians nearby laughed at private jokes carried clearly along the sound-reflecting colonnades. Justice, it seems, had better hearing for some than others. Modern courtrooms still echo this legacy, sometimes literally. Next time you watch a high-profile trial, notice how the judge's bench often sits on a raised platform with wood paneling to enhance vocal projection, while defendants frequently speak from sound-absorbing carpeted areas. The technology has changed, but the principle remains. Who gets heard isn't just about volume, it's about physics. And 2,000 years ago in Rome, they wrote the playbook on turning architecture into acoustic bias. The stones of those basilicas whisper an uncomfortable truth sometimes. The verdict isn't decided by the evidence, it's decided by the echo. High in the Andes, where clouds cling to stone like whispers, Machu Picchu doesn't just sit on the landscape, it conducts it. Those iconic terraces carving across the mountainside, they weren't just for farming. Each level functioned like the rippled surface of a gong, catching human voices and bouncing them down the valley with startling clarity. A single shout from the Temple of the Sun could travel over a mile, carried not by technology, but by the perfect alignment of stone and slope. The Inca didn't need watchtowers or signal fires. Their entire city was a broadcasting system, with terraces acting as acoustic lenses to focus sound into laser-sharp beams across the Urubamba River below. But the real magic lies in the rocks themselves. Tap certain walls with your knuckles like the polished stones near the Intihuatana, the so-called hitching post of the sun, and they ring with an unearthly metallic chime. Geologists confirm these are andesite blocks with unusually high quartz content, crystals aligned just right to vibrate like tuning forks. For the Inca, who believed mountains were living deities called apus, these singing stones weren't just curiosities. They were voices of the gods. During rituals, priests likely struck them in sequence, creating cascading tones that mimicked the sacred ayar. the mythical siblings said to have emerged from mountain caves to found the empire. Then there's the water. Machu Picchu's intricate fountains and channels did more than quench thirst. The constant trickle through carved stone gutters created a white noise that masked distant conversations in the royal quarters, while amplifying the rhythmic splashes of ceremonial washing. Wind played its part too, howling through the temple of the three windows at precise angles to produce eerie harmonic drones. Modern sound artists have recorded these phenomena. When the afternoon breeze hits at 45 degrees, the temple literally hums at 111 Hz, a frequency known to induce trance states. What emerges isn't just a city, but a symphony. Every element, the metallic rocks, the whispering terraces, the chanting water, worked in concert to create an immersive soundscape where nature itself seemed to obey Inca command. That's the ultimate power move, when your authority doesn't just come from laws or armies, but from the very mountains singing your name. Who dares question it? The stones of Machu Picchu still hold that lesson. True control doesn't shout. It lets the world echo for you. Crossing the marble bridge toward the Forbidden City's Meridian Gate, your first mistake would be walking alone. The moment your boots touched the patterned stones of the central path reserved exclusively for the emperor, something strange happened. A single footstep multiplied, bouncing off the gate's concave walls in a cascade of echoes that made one man sound like 50. This wasn't an architectural quirk. It was a sonic illusion engineered to humble. Officials arriving for dawn audiences would shuffle nervously, their own footsteps betraying them, each echo a reminder that even their solitude was an illusion. The emperor's presence loomed in the very air. Yet step through that towering gate into the throne room beyond, and the rules of sound flipped violently. The cavernous hall, lined with dense Nanmu wood pillars and hung with silk tapestries, didn't echo. It swallowed. A whispered plea wouldn't carry past the first row of kneeling ministers. A dropped ceremonial sword hit the floor with a muffled thud, as if the room itself refused to acknowledge mistakes. Scientists now know why. The ceiling's intricate coffered design, combined with the precise density of the bricks beneath the floor, creates an acoustic black hole. Frequencies between 200 and 500 Hz, the range of human speech, get absorbed almost entirely. The effect was psychological warfare. Visitors entered braced for grandeur, only to be gut-punched by silence. The genius lay in the contrast. Outside, sound was amplified to intimidate. Inside, its absence did the same. Even the palace's layout played along. The emperor's private quarters sat atop the artificial Prospect Hill, where nighttime stillness let him hear a whispered conspiracy in the distant servants' quarters, while his own conversations vanished into soundproofed walls. It was a totalitarian soundtrack. Your secrets were never safe, but his were forever out of reach. Modern engineers have tried to replicate the throne room's acoustics and failed. The closest comparison, ancient chambers used to test spacecraft, rooms so silent they make visitors hallucinate. That's the chilling truth of the Forbidden City. Its walls didn't just block sound, they weaponized perception. When you can make a man question whether his own voice still works, you don't need chains to bind him. The air itself becomes a cage. Deep in the Guatemalan jungle, where morning mist clings to the limestone pyramids of Tikal, the ruins don't just stand silent, they speak. When the wind blows just right through hidden vents in Temple 4, the entire structure erupts into an unearthly howl, a sound so precise it mimics the roar of a jaguar. This isn't some quirk of erosion. Archaeologists have found ceramic whistles embedded in the temple's facade, tiny instruments tuned to transform breeze into a chorus of animal cries. The effect is chilling. One moment, the jungle is still. The next, the very stones seem to growl, as if the gods themselves are stirring. The Maya didn't leave behind instruction manuals, but the evidence is carved in stone. Temple alignments catch the dawn wind at specific angles, funneling it through narrow channels that act like ancient wind instruments. At the summer solstice, when the sun rose directly behind Temple 4, the howling reached its peak, a sonic spectacle timed to coincide with royal coronations or victory celebrations. Imagine the psychological impact, a new king ascending the steps as the pyramid erupts in unearthly cries, the crowd below convinced the spirits were anointing him. Even the acoustics of the Great Plaza played along. The flat limestone plaza acted like a sounding board, reflecting the temple's howls back in overlapping waves that made it impossible to locate the source. The message was clear: authority didn't come from mortals, it whispered through the stones, but the real stroke of genius was in the silence that followed. The howls never lasted long, just long enough to haunt. By the time the wind died down, the king would be standing motionless atop the pyramid, the sudden quiet making his presence feel even more potent. It was a masterclass in tension and release, using sound to manipulate attention, and in a civilization where rulers claimed to mediate between the human and divine worlds, that control wasn't just symbolic. It was survival. What's haunting is how little has changed. Modern leaders still stage their grandest moments against backdrops of calculated sound. Think of fireworks timed to speeches or rallies punctuated by fighter jet flyovers. The technology has advanced, but the instinct remains the same. Wrap your authority in noise that feels inevitable, undeniable, like the voice of nature itself. Tikal's pyramids remind us that power doesn't always need force. Sometimes all it takes is the right whisper at the right moment, and the world will lean in to listen. Dawn at the Giza Plateau didn't just bring light, it brought voices. As the first sliver of sun crested the horizon, a low hum would ripple through the temples, a sound so uncanny it seemed to rise from the earth itself. The source, Egypt's colossal statues, their limestone bodies expanding minutely under the sudden warmth, the friction of crystalline grains producing eerie, resonant tones. These weren't random groans of stone. Priests meticulously recorded which statues sang and when, aligning ceremonies so the voices of gods seemed to erupt on cue. The Great Sphinx, its weathered face tilted toward the rising sun, may have been the grandest instrument of all. Recent ground-penetrating radar reveals hollow chambers beneath its pores, spaces that, when struck by desert winds, could have turned the entire monument into a giant wind instrument. Picture the scene: pilgrims gathering at dawn, the air taut with anticipation, when suddenly the Sphinx itself begins to moan, its voice deep enough to vibrate in your chest. The mechanics were as precise as they were poetic. Certain statues, like the seated colossi of Amenhotep III at Luxor, were carved from rocks rich in quartz and feldspar minerals that expand at different rates when heated. As sunlight hit them, these materials would grind against each other, emitting frequencies between 60 and 100 Hz, the same range as a human chant. Temples amplified the effect. The hypostyle hall at Karnak, with its forest of towering columns, acted like a stone soundboard, catching these vibrations and weaving them into a chorus. But the real stroke of genius was timing. Priests knew exactly when the third ray of sunlight would strike the lips of the statue of Ptah in Memphis, triggering a tone that echoed down the processional avenue. To worshippers, it wasn't physics, it was the god himself breaking his daily silence. Even the tools of ritual played along. Ceremonial systems, those sacred rattles shaped like the Angkor weren't just musical instruments. Their bronze discs were tuned to match the resonant frequency of temple statues, creating harmonic reinforcement. Shake one near the Colossi of Memnon at the right moment, and the sound didn't just echo, it multiplied. as if unseen voices were joining in. This was divine ventriloquism at its most sophisticated, when the wind, the sun, and human hands all conspired to make stone speak. Who could doubt the gods walked among them? Yet the most haunting detail isn't how they did it, but why it stopped. Earthquakes toppled some singing statues, shifting their internal structures. Others fell victim to well-meaning restorations, ancient repairs that unknowingly dampened their vibrations. Today, the stones stand mute, but on rare mornings when the desert air is just right and the sun strikes at the perfect angle, visitors still report whispers in the wind. Maybe it's imagination, or maybe, after millennia, the gods haven't entirely lost their voice. The longships slicing through North Sea fog didn't just carry warriors, they carried sound like weapons. Picture this, 30 oars dipping in unison, their rhythmic splash blending with deep-throated chants, the vibrations traveling through the ship's hull and skimming across the water with unnatural clarity. Enemies on distant shores would hear it first, a low, gathering thunder rolling toward them long before the dragon-proud ships broke the horizon. Norse sagas called it the Song of the Sea Wolves, a sonic ambush designed to unravel enemy nerves before the first arrow flew. Modern shipbuilders have tested replicas like the Roskilde 6 and found something startling. The overlapping planks of clinker-built hulls, sealed with tar-soaked wool, acted like the body of a giant lute. When rowers struck their oars in perfect sync, the hollow space between the inner and outer hulls amplified specific frequencies, particularly the deep, droning tones used in Viking war chants. Sound waves didn't just travel outward, they clung to the water's surface, bending around islands and penetrating coves where eyes couldn't see. Archaeoacoustic studies suggest these ships could project sound up to 3 miles under ideal conditions, turning the ocean itself into a whispering gallery. But the real terror lay in the distortion. As the chants bounced between ship and shoreline, they morphed, layering into echoes that made 50 warriors sound like 500. Surviving accounts from monasteries describe the effect. A single verse of the Draumkved, the Vikings' haunting battle hymn, would fracture into dissonant harmonies as if the sea were singing in tongues. For Christian monks raised on Gregorian chants' orderly harmonies, this sonic chaos felt demonic. The Vikings weaponized more than volume, they exploited the physics of fear. Low-frequency vibrations between 30 and 80 Hz, the range of their drumming feet on the deck, are proven to trigger primal unease. Combine that with the ship's carved figureheads, their gaping mouths acting as megaphones to direct sound forward, and you have a floating terror machine. By the time the longships landed, many defenders were already broken, convinced they faced not men, but some snarling extension of the sea itself. Yet the most cunning detail wasn't the ships, it was the silence that followed. Viking crews could stop rowing on command, letting momentum carry them the final stretch in eerie quiet. After minutes of deafening chants, that sudden hush was paralyzing. Defenders would strain their ears, hearts pounding, waiting for an attack that could come from any direction. The lesson, true power isn't just about being heard. It's about controlling when others desperately need to listen. What's chilling is how little we've evolved. Modern militaries still use sound as a psychological tool, from the scream of Stuka dive bombers in World War II to the bone-rattling bass of AC-130 gunships today. The Vikings just proved you don't need engines or speakers. Sometimes all it takes is wood, water, and the willingness to make your enemies' nightmares sing. Beneath the sun-baked streets of ancient Persia, a hidden network of tunnels did more than quench thirst. They whispered secrets. The kanats, those ingenious underground canals that brought water from mountain aquifers to arid cities, doubled as covert communication lines for rulers who understood that control flowed not just through water, but through sound. Picture a messenger crouching at the mouth of a Kanat shaft, his voice skimming along the damp, curved walls like a stone skipping across water. Within minutes, his words would emerge miles away in the palace courtyard, carried not by couriers or smoke signals, but by the physics of sound waves ricocheting through these liquid-filled passageways. What made the Kanats perfect for this sonic espionage was their construction. Each tunnel was precisely graded to maintain a gentle downhill slope for water flow, a design that coincidentally created ideal acoustics. The smooth, moist walls absorbed high frequencies while amplifying low tones, making deep voices travel startling distances without distortion. Persian engineers likely discovered this by accident when diggers realized their shouts could be heard several shafts away. But the ruling class quickly weaponized it. Historical accounts describe how Khans stationed trusted agents at key junctions to relay messages up the chain, creating what amounted to an ancient version of secure fiber optic cables, except these pulsed with whispers rather than light. The real genius lay in the water itself. Flowing at a consistent depth, it acted as a natural sound filter. Testimony from medieval historian Al-Muqaddasi reveals how officials would partially block certain kanats to alter water flow, changing the acoustics to prevent eavesdropping. A message bound for military commanders might be sent through a fast-moving channel where the rushing water obscured all but the loudest shouts, while delicate political intrigues traveled through slower, quieter branches. Some kanats even featured listening chambers, small alcoves where spies could intercept messages by pressing their ears to specially designed resonance jars embedded in the walls. Yet the most chilling application wasn't secrecy, it was illusion. Certain kanats fed into palace gardens, their outlets hidden behind decorative fountains. By speaking into a tunnel entrance, a Shah could make his voice seem to emanate from the water itself, dazzling visitors with apparent miracles. The Greek historian Polybius describes one such stunt where the ruler Antiochus staged an oracle fountain that answered petitioners' questions, a trick achieved by hidden priests listening through kanat shafts and responding through the water's echo. What's haunting is how this dual-use infrastructure mirrors our modern dilemmas. Today's internet cables, like the kanats, carry both sustenance and surveillance. The Persians just proved that when you control the channels of communication, whether they're carved from stone or coded in silicon, you don't just move information. You move minds. The kanats stand as a reminder. Every technology is a tool, and every tool is a weapon waiting for the right hand to wield it. The Zapotec death whistles don't just make noise, they harvest fear. Carved from clay into hollow skulls with gaping mouths, these palm-sized instruments unleash a sound unlike anything in nature when blown. It's not a musical note, not a simple shriek, but something far more unsettling. A multi-layered scream that seems to rise from the earth itself, a noise that flips some primal switch in the human brain. Modern acoustic analysis reveals why. The whistle's internal chambers split the airflow into dissonant frequencies, one high and piercing like a dying animal, another low and guttural like a choking gasp. Combined, they create what researchers call acoustic horror, a sound designed to bypass logic and trigger instinctive panic. In battle, the effect would have been devastating. Imagine standing your ground against an oncoming Zapotec warrior, only to hear dozens of these screams erupting from the fog, directionless, inhuman, seeming to come from everywhere at once. Spanish conquistador accounts describe how the whistles turned disciplined troops into frantic mobs, their formations crumbling as soldiers clutched their ears against what they believed were demonic wails. The genius was in the misdirection. Unlike war drums or battle horns that rally one's own side, death whistles existed solely to dismantle enemy morale. They didn't communicate, they traumatized. Yet their ritual use was even more calculated. Found clutched in the hands of buried warriors, these whistles likely played a role in psychopomp ceremonies, rituals guiding souls to the afterlife. Blown in underground tombs, their screams would ricochet off stone walls, creating the illusion of voices answering from beyond. Archaeologists experimenting with replicas in temple ruins discovered something eerie. At certain angles, the sound waves interact to produce a third, unearthly tone, a frequency of 110 Hz, known to induce trance states. The Zapotec didn't just want mourners to hear the dead, they wanted them to feel the presence pressing against their skin. What's chilling is how little the technology has changed. Modern riot control uses similar acoustic weapons, rad cannons that project debilitating noise, or drones equipped with scream generators to disperse crowds. The Zapotec simply understood earlier what militaries now confirm. Sound isn't just heard, it hijacks. A well-crafted noise can turn courage into terror, doubt into conviction, silence into a chorus of ghosts. These clay skulls whisper a timeless truth. Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a blade, but a breath shaped just right to unravel minds. Scientists armed with laser scanners and microphones now step into ruins not just to see, but to listen. This is acoustic archaeology, a field where lasers map every crack and curve of ancient walls, not for their visual grandeur, but for how they bend sound. Using LiDAR technology, researchers create precise 3D models of spaces like the Hypogeum of Malta or the Mayan Ballcourts, then feed these digital blueprints into audio software that simulates how whispers, chants, or even footsteps would have traveled centuries ago. The results are eerie. A clap in the virtual replica of Chavín de Huántar's labyrinth echoes exactly as it would in 1200 BCE, 7 distinct repetitions, each bouncing off stone ducts carved to warp human speech into something divine. But this isn't just about recreating noise, it's about decoding a lost language of control. When acoustic archaeologists modeled the oracle chamber in Delphi, they discovered something unsettling. The temple's parabolic walls didn't merely amplify the Pythia's voice, they filtered it. High-pitched hesitations, the natural stumbles of human speech, were dampened, while low, resonant tones rang clear. The software revealed how a priestess's slurred words, distorted by ethylene gas, would have been further polished by the architecture itself, emerging as a seamless stream of oracular authority. Every hiccup of doubt, every tremor of uncertainty erased by stone. The real breakthrough came when these tools exposed intentional, dead zones. In Epidorus's theater, long praised for its perfect acoustics, scans showed certain seats, always those reserved for women and foreigners, were subtly muted by the curvature of the steps. Meanwhile, the benches nearest the stage caught sound like satellite dishes, ensuring elite male citizens heard every syllable. Even silence, it seems, was engineered. Perhaps most haunting are the discoveries made by accident. While mapping Petra's Sick Canyon, researchers noticed their equipment picking up phantom echoes, sound waves bouncing in patterns that shouldn't exist. It took months to realize the Nabateans had carved nearly invisible concave niches along the cliffs, creating acoustic hotspots where a guard's whispered warning could leapfrog ahead of approaching caravans. These weren't decorations, they were sonic tripwires. What emerges from these digital reconstructions isn't just a collection of clever tricks. It's a blueprint for an ancient science of persuasion, one that understood sound's power to bypass reason and target the gut. Today's advertisers and politicians spend millions chasing what these builders baked into stone: the ability to make a voice feel inevitable, to turn vibration into conviction. The difference: our ancestors didn't just want you to hear them, they wanted you to believe the world itself was speaking. The moment writing carved words into clay, something fundamental shifted in how power spoke. No longer dependent on grand temples or perfectly tuned chambers, rulers could etch commands into permanence, laws on stone, edicts on parchment, myths in ink. Sound, once the primary medium of authority, became supplemental. A king's voice no longer needed to shake the walls of a throne room when his decrees could be read aloud in every village square. But here's the twist: the physics of persuasion didn't disappear, they evolved. Consider the Roman Senate, where the shift was already visible. Orators still trained their voices to fill the curia's acoustics, but now their speeches were transcribed by scribes, amplified not by echoes but by copies. The written word could travel farther than any shout, yet the elites clung to sonic dominance. They built basilicas with vaulted ceilings that made legal pronouncements reverberate like divine judgments, ensuring even as literacy spread, the weight of spoken authority remained. Fast forward to medieval cathedrals, where the Latin Mass rolled over illiterate congregations in waves of Gregorian chant. The very architecture designed to make sacred texts feel less like words and more like forces of nature. Then came the real revolution: electricity. With microphones and speakers, a whisper could outboom a thunderclap. Hitler's Nuremberg rallies didn't rely on stone megaphones, they had banks of loudspeakers turning his rasp into a seismic roar. Modern politicians don't need pyramids to project godhood. A teleprompter and a sound engineer can make a high school gymnasium feel like Delphi, yet the old tricks linger. Notice how today's echo chambers aren't made of stone but algorithms, social media platforms that amplify certain frequencies of speech while muffling others, creating the same disorienting effects as Petra's whispering tunnels. The most telling evidence lies in the spaces we still sculpt for sound. Courtrooms mute dissent with sound-absorbing panels, just as Roman basilicas did with their lofty ceilings. Concert halls like the Vienna Musikarine tune their golden interiors to the same frequencies Mayan Ballcourts once used, proving that even now we instinctively understand sound bends minds. The tools have changed, but the game hasn't. Whether through a priest's chant echoing off temple walls or a viral tweet ricocheting through timelines, the goal remains: to make some voices feel inevitable while others vanish into the walls. What our ancestors knew, and we often forget, is that authority doesn't just live in words, it lives in the air between them. The hum of a well-tuned room, the hush of a crowd straining to hear, the way a perfectly timed pause can make a lie feel like revelation. The stones of Chavin or the servers of Silicon Valley might use different methods, but they share the same truth: control the sound, and you control the story. And whoever controls the story controls the future. Modern echo chambers don't need stone walls to bend reality. They're built with lines of code. Scroll through any social media feed, and you'll feel it: the uncanny way certain voices swell into a roar while others vanish without a trace. This isn't random, it's architecture. Just as ancient priests designed temples to amplify divine whispers, today's platforms engineer digital spaces where your deepest convictions bounce back at you, polished and amplified until doubt feels impossible. The mechanisms have changed: algorithmic sorting instead of parabolic walls, engagement metrics instead of resonant frequencies, but the goal remains unchanged: to make some truths feel inevitable while others dissolve into silence. Take the way content filters work. Like the whispering galleries of Petra, where niches in the rock caught and carried select voices, recommendation algorithms are tuned to catch the emotional frequency of your engagement. Click on a conspiracy theory once, and suddenly your feed becomes an acoustic chamber where that idea echoes relentlessly. The effect is eerily similar to standing in the oracle chamber at Delphi, where the walls filtered out hesitation, leaving only prophetic certainty. Only now, the oracle isn't a priestess, it's a machine that learned to mirror your biases back at you, louder and more convincingly than you ever could yourself. Yet the real power lies in what gets muted. Ancient rulers understood that control wasn't just about amplification, it was about selective silence. In Roman basilicas, the acoustics swallowed the voices of the accused while magnifying the prosecutor's words. Today's shadow banning and content demotion achieve the same end. Posts that challenge dominant narratives are funneled into acoustic dead zones, their reach throttled until they're drowned out by the chorus of approved ideas. The result, a soundscape where dissent isn't just unheard, it's engineered to feel non-existent. What's chilling is how little we notice the design. When you stand in the Hypogeum of Malta, you can physically feel the resonance of the oracle chamber vibrating in your chest. But when an algorithm pushes you toward extremism or lulls you into complacency, there's no stone to touch, no carving to trace, just the quiet, insistent sense that what you're hearing is simply how the world is. That's the genius of modern echo chambers. They've stripped away the stagecraft, leaving only the illusion of consensus. The lesson hidden in these ancient ruins isn't just about how sound was manipulated. It's about how willingly we confuse acoustics for truth. Whether it's a Mayan Ballcourt making rulers sound like thunder or a viral hashtag turning fringe opinions into deafening movements, the principle remains. When you control the architecture of hearing, you don't just shape what people listen to. You shape what they're capable of imagining. The stones of Chavin and the servers of Silicon Valley whisper the same warning. Belief is never just about ideas. It's about which ones get to reverberate. Lessons from these ancient sound masters ripple across centuries, revealing a truth as unsettling as it is universal. The spaces we inhabit don't just hold us, they shape how we think. Take the way Chavín de Huántar's labyrinthine corridors warped whispers into godlike proclamations. That wasn't just theater, it was a blueprint for how environment molds belief. When sound behaves unnaturally, when it lingers too long or arrives from impossible directions, it doesn't just startle the ear, it rewires the mind. Our ancestors knew this intimately. They understood that repetition in the right space could turn a lie into liturgy, a suggestion into scripture. The Hypogeum of Malta didn't just amplify chants, it made them vibrate in worshippers' bones until doubt dissolved into devotion. But here's the pivot. These techniques weren't about volume, they were about control. The Mayan Ballcourts didn't echo all sounds equally. They favored the frequencies of priests' voices, just as Petra's sick canyon filtered out dissent while carrying commands crystal clear. This selectivity is the hallmark of all effective persuasion, ancient or modern. Whether it's stone walls or social media algorithms, the goal remains identical: to amplify what serves authority and mute what threatens it. The Romans perfected this in their basilicas, where vaulted ceilings turned legal verdicts into thunder while defendants' pleas evaporated upward. Today's digital platforms mirror this with eerie precision: shadow banning, recommendation biases, and engagement metrics that function like invisible acoustic dampeners, silencing certain voices while boosting others into artificial crescendos. What makes these ancient examples so vital isn't their ingenuity, but their honesty. They reveal manipulation as a craft, one that thrives on transparency's absence. The Oracle of Delphi didn't hide her chamber's parabolic walls. She didn't need to. Few pilgrims ever saw behind the curtain. Similarly, our modern echo chambers rarely announce their architecture. We scroll through feeds unaware of the algorithmic ducts funneling some ideas toward us while diverting others away. The Zapotec death whistles teach us this lesson brutally. The most potent manipulation often feels like nature itself speaking. When a sound seems to come from nowhere, whether it's a scream materializing from fog or a conspiracy theory surfacing repeatedly in your feed, it bypasses skepticism and lodges straight in the subconscious. Yet within these ruins lies resistance. Understanding how sound was weaponized is the first step to disarming it. The Vikings' terror-inducing chants lost power when enemies learned they were mortal men, not sea demons. Likewise, recognizing that today's viral outrage or polarizing rhetoric might be algorithmic reverberation, not organic consensus, cuts the strings of persuasion. The ancient world's greatest warning isn't about the past, it's about the present. When we marvel at how easily our ancestors were swayed by echoing stones, we miss the irony. We're still leaning in, listening hard, mistaking the shape of the chamber for the truth of the voice. The difference now, we carry the chambers in our pockets, and that means the power to reshape them, or step outside entirely, lies not with priests or kings, but with us.